the channel, it's return to the Kyle Peterson Top 5, and we're doing a He-Man inspired Top 5 for the first time here on the channel, as we're taking a look at my Top 5 Manny Faces figures of all time.
And the spirit of Ultimate Warrior will run forever!
Kyle here, and welcome back to the channel for another Kyle Peterson Top 5, a Thursday tradition here on the channel, as every single Thursday we're counting down my top 5 favorites of something, and today's something is Manny Faces, of course, Masters of the Universe, He-Man in the Masters of the Universe, an all-timer from my childhood. Who are we fooling? An all-timer now, and we've never done a He-Man inspired top 5 here on the channel. We've done G.I. Joe, I think, in the past. Now we're doing a He-Man. We've done Marvel, but primarily we've done wrestling. So a little break from the wrestling, and we're doing a little something different here. And theoretically, we could go through almost all of the Masters of the Universe lines, figures, things like that to do a top 5. But Manny Faces, he drew the card today because I just recently unboxed his brand new Origins figure, the Amazon exclusive. Check out that review on the channel. And I started doing some comparison pictures and stuff like that with some of the other ones, playing around with them. I was like, man, I forgot how much I really loved Manny Faces, especially when I was a little kid. Just an all-timer out there, and especially for me as a little kid, he was a big-time part of my playing days. But it's funny, in the cartoon, maybe he didn't have as big of a role as he did in my childhood playing with my toys. That's for sure. We can say that. But always one of the iconic characters. I love the 3 heads flipping around on him. Just a very cool toy for old Kyle and young Kyle as well. And hopefully, maybe for you as well. So as usual with these videos, this is my list. This is my top 5. Put your top 5 in the comments down below. So without further ado, let's get after it. Let's start at number 5. All right, we begin at number 5. And number 5 figure comes from the Masters Universe Classics line. Of course, you know I'm just a classics guy at the end of the day. But this one comes from the time of the Filmation toy line. And we've seen that before in many many different toy lines. Here he is right here. We've seen this from currently in Ninja Turtles. We're seeing that a lot. You got characters based on the arcade games, characters based on the movies, characters based on the 80s cartoon, characters based on the toy line, characters that are the toy line with Playmates re-releasing stuff. So we've seen it before, but this was the first time we saw it from He-Man, as a lot of the 80s properties of toy lines, of course, here was the show, here was the figures, and there was something lost in translation. Transformers a lot of time, even a few of the G.I. Joes, and definitely a few of the He-Man figures. Manny Faces, closer than a lot of them. However, this is inspired by the look of the Filmation cartoon, and if you're like me, maybe you're not, but I got into He-Man from the cartoon, which translated into the toys. I'm sure there's some that got into the toys, translated into the cartoon, and I guarantee there's some of them just had the toys, never watched the cartoon, if you can believe that, but I guarantee there's some people out there that way. But this one always kind of captured my heart. Of course, the Classics line was always really special to me. It was one of those lines where I was a lot younger, didn't have the finances to collect it at the time, and I would just admire it from afar. There'd be a new announcement of a new figure, and I'd be like, oh, I want that so bad. And I never broke. But all these years later, of course, I did pick up that entire collection. You've seen it in my action figure tour videos. But this one, always really cool. Always reminds me back to the first time I ever laid eyes on old Manny Faces. And that's why he's coming in at number 5. Next up at number 4, what is old is new again. And number 4, Manny Faces, comes to us from the Masters Universe Origins toy line, of course, from Mattel, for Manny Faces. Now, we got 2 here, and I guess I'm cheating in a little bit of ways here, as I got both of them here. But if I had to choose, I would choose the latest one from Amazon, as this one is the old one, the original one we got a couple of years ago in the Origins line, is a little bit too bright in the skin tone color. I kind of like the peachy skin on this one, but I like both of these figures, and I like that the heads are different on these as well. And And hardcore Manny Faces fans, man, you've got quite the collection going on because you got to display one with each face showing. But definitely a cool one that really brings me back to my childhood. That's what the Origins line really does at the end of the day. I've told the story before. I remember when the Origins first started coming out, He-Man, Skeletor were everywhere at Walmart stores and Targets as well. And I remember in the aisle just looking one day, and there was a dad with his kid. His kid was like 4 years old. They were looking for Ben 10 or something like that. And the dad stopped dead in his tracks and just said, oh my gosh, I had that when I was a kid. And had that nostalgic. I watched it like blow up right there. And him pick it off the shelf and just kind of stare at it. And that's kind of what the Origins line does. Every time I see a new figure, I see that kind of classic packaging. It brings me back to a little kid going to Toys R Us, Children's Palace, KB, Target, Walmart, Venture, Pamida, Places, Ben Franklin's, you name it. I was at all of them. But it does have that nostalgic feel, and that's what this one has as well. Now, not quite as nostalgic as the original one, and never really is, but man, it gets very, very close, and it's just cool to have these all these years later with the new bells and whistles and a lot cheaper price point, I guess, really, at the end of the day there. So number 4 for me is Masters Universe Origins Manny Faces, and if I had to choose, I would definitely go the Amazon version. We've hit the halfway point of the countdown. You got your list together. Make sure you put it in the comments down below. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to this very YouTube channel, as every single Thursday, we're doing a countdown of some sorts over here on the channel. So now we're at the number 3 spot. And like I said, once again, I'm just a classics guy. Mattel Classics Manny Faces. Now, this Manny Faces, when I see this reminds me of course, the original one I had when I was a kid. But when you're a little kid, you're playing with that toy and you're using your imagination. That's part of the fun of toys. Still is, really, at the end of the day. But you're using your imagination, and this is how you imagine that original figure to be. It's a lot like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The Playmates Turtles, when you're a kid, you're playing with them, but you're imagining them from the cartoon is how they look. When they don't quite look that way, Manny Faces is closer than those turtles for sure. But this is what I wanted. This is what I imagined. This was my Manny Faces from a little kid, grown up to imagine how I would have played with him and how I imagined him as a little kid playing. And this is absolute almost perfection here, and especially when this one came out. This is one of those jaw droppers for me when the classics line was getting rolled out. Just like, oh man, how cool is that? And it's still cool all these years later. And like I said, I'm just a classics guy. I love that classics line. I love this Manny Faces. That's why he's coming in at number 3. We've hit the number 2 spot in the countdown, and number 2, possibly the most controversial pick here on this very list, as we're going to Mattel once again, of course. We're going to Masters Universe Revelations New Eternia Manny Faces. Now, this is a very recent release. This is hitting Target stores right now if you're on the hunt for this one. And we did a review on this one as well, so check out that review on the channel. But man, oh man, this is like the love of the classics without breaking your wallet in the bank, with a lot of new twists and updates to it. Now, how cool is it? Of course, you got the normal thing where you switch the heads around, you move them like we were classic used to here, but you get another suitcase full of extra heads. You technically have 6 heads with this Manny Faces. It's a nod to the past with a nod to the future as well. Everything stores on him. You can put this backpack into his back. Just a dynamite figure with all the modern articulation, all the bells and whistles of 2023, with the classic feel and the classic look of Manny Faces. Just an absolute game changer, and one that is definitely going to be on my Masters Universe top 10 list, year-end list. There's no doubt about it. This is a great figure. Very, very cool. And like I said, hitting stores right now, so you got a chance to buy this at retail, or maybe even play the long game, get this for like 10 bucks. Man, just a very cool Manny Faces figure. All these years later, going all the way back from the 80s, who'd have thought 2023 would bring us one of the greatest Manny Faces figures of all time? But definitely a game changer, definitely one to pick up if you're into Manny Faces and if you're into He-Man. So that's number 2. What's number 1? I'm sure you guys will be able to guess this, but we're going to talk about it. Up next, the number 1 Manny Faces figure of all time. Here we are, the number 1 spot, and do you have your list together? Like I said earlier, make sure you put it in the comments down below, and then you made it this far in the channel, make sure you subscribe, make sure you like this video, check out all the other videos on the channel. We got a lot going on every single day on this YouTube channel. Like the young James Brown of YouTube is what we're over here. We got to put the cape on, and I say, no, we got more to do, and that's exactly what we do. We got 3 videos every single day, at least for right now we do. But now we're at the number 1 spot with Manny Faces, and I think most know which one this is going to be. And unfortunately, this doesn't happen very often on the channel. I do not have the number one figure. I do not own it in my collection. I did it one time, and then I had the Great Purge of 1999. Still, one of these days, we'll talk about that on a channel. Long-form video. I have to get my thoughts together. But I did have that in the Purge. But what is it? Of course, it is the original Manny Faces from Mattel. Back in the early 80s, of course. The one that started it all, the one that changed a generation, something like that. And still chasing that dragon on that first Manny Faces. And what a game changer that one was. We've referenced it in this video a few other times. But as a kid, Manny Faces was such a great figure and a great one to play in my battles and my wars because he changed his heads, of course. You'd have good guy Manny Faces with his more human face. You'd have robot Manny Faces. He was usually a good guy. But then you had that monster face, and you'd flip over to that. All of a sudden, he had joined Skeletor. He joined Merman and Beastman, and he's off to fight Prince Adam and He-Man and Man-at-Arms and the rest of the crew. So I love the dynamic of that, and he was always a big-time part of my playing days as he would switch back and forth between teams. You know, just when you think Skeletor's getting the edge on He-Man and the crew, he would turn into a good guy. He'd get hit in the head, and it would flip over back, and he'd turn the tide there. And so many fun times playing. I'm even getting goosebumps talking about it a little bit. Just so many great memories as a kid playing with those figures back in the day. But Manny Face just an all-time great, and there's nothing like your original childhood toys in a lot of ways, and that one was so special, and I could still picture myself sitting on the floor with Castle Grayskull and Snake Mountain and having and reenacting and playing all that kind of stuff. Just a really, really fun figure. One I'd love to own all these years later. I'd love to go back and get all my He-Man stuff, all my G.I. Joe stuff, Transformers, you name it. Just not in the cards, not in the pocketbook, and I just don't know where I would put it. So I kind of leave the memories alone in a lot of ways, but boy, I tell you what, I get a Manny Faces one of these days at a cheap price. You never know. You never know. Just enough to be dangerous. We'll see what happens. But a very, very fun one here. A little nostalgic video in the top 5. And really all top 5 videos are a little nostalgic in one way or the other. But this one was a lot of fun to do. So I hope you guys did enjoy. Hopefully you put your top 5 list in the comments down below. Hopefully you like this video. Hopefully you subscribe to the channel. Hopefully you hit the notification bell. And hopefully you check out the Patreon. Of course, early access to videos like this, bonus content, exclusive content, giveaways, Q&As, you name it. It's all going down over there on the old Patreon channel. And best of all, you do support the channel and all the content it does bring. You can also support the channel at ProWrestlingTees.com. Search Kyle Peterson. And don't forget social media. SirPaul64 on Twitter, Instagram, _Kyle_Peterson. So for Manny Faces, I am Kyle. See you guys all real soon.